Hello, everyone, and happy St. Patrick's Day, too. Just want to throw that in since it's our first week of our classes, and today's our third day that we're doing our virtual classes for spring 2021. Just want to give you a little quick history on New Knowledge Adventures. At this point, around 15 years ago, there was a group of dedicated volunteers. They came together with ISU and a partnership in Pocatello to put something like this together. Everyone's a volunteer that participates, along with our great speakers who volunteer their time. Everything is free for all of us to participate in. We'd like you to walk away with some new knowledge today. We're hoping that that's what you're here for, maybe with a little bit of fun too. But in 2014, AARP, along with ISU in Meridian and Treasure Valley YMCA, formed a partnership, and we call it Treasure Valley's New Knowledge Adventure. But now that we're on Zoom as of last fall, we can have people from all over the state, along with actually anyone that's out of state can join if they just sign up on our website. So we'd like to thank you all for spreading the word about these classes, and that we do have classes for the next couple of months. If you have any great ideas or you know someone who'd like to present, please share that with us. I happen to be on the curriculum committee, and we're always looking for new classes. So that's something I just want to share too. And at this point, I want to tell you a little bit about our speaker today, who is sharing his time and knowledge with us. And the class, you know, is called Technology for Distance Learning. And the person who is presenting to us today is Eric Talbert. And if we weren't in COVID times, we'd be in a classroom just like you see on the screen here, and he'd be presenting there. But we're in the way of the world of Zoom. So today he's going to present this class to us with Zoom. He supports this distance learning at the physical therapy department at ISU. And he operates and maintains the equipment that allows the classes to take place in real time. So between Pocatello and Meridian. And he's a former college and high school instructor, so he has over 20 years of experience in this type of video production. And he has also done things like live sports, documentaries, and reality television production, is what I understand. So we're going to have this be a session where you can put things into the chat window if you would like to ask questions. If there are questions you feel are pertinent and you would like them answered while he is presenting, you can go ahead and either use the reactions, raise your hand, or we'll all watch. And if you have anything you'd like to ask, Eric would be glad to answer then, or we can save those questions for down along the way or at the end of the presentation. So again, thank you for being here. This is being recorded. So if you know someone who wasn't able to make it today, they will be able to see this at a later date. And with that, I'll have Eric take this away for us. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'm gonna start with a little screen share here. I'm gonna get my presentation up. And if you're unfamiliar with Zoom, will probably change your layout a little bit. If you look in the upper right corner of your Zoom window, you should see a little button, little radio button as they call it, and it allows you to change your view. And so I think some people like to see the whole audience or all the participants. That would be your gallery view, and you can switch that to speaker view if you like. And then if you grab the window between your speaker and the presentation, you can actually slide that and adjust it so you can resize those windows however you like. So does anybody have any like interface questions? Can you all see this title screen I have here? And can hear me all right? Okay, cool. So thanks Marie, and thanks AARP for putting this on. Just to kind of carry on from what she was saying is I started this position at ISU in Meridian in 2018. It was in the fall. It was just after Thanksgiving, as I recall. And in spite of had parallel career as a teacher and doing video production. And sometimes I got to marry those. I got to teach video production at high schools or at universities, but I'd never actually been in a distance learning type position, specifically what I do now. But I think I had a background that gave me some aptitude for it. But in 2018, I was kind of new to it. So everything I'm showing you today, I kind of picked up in the last few years with good coaching and good training. And because it's a technology-based industry, it changes a lot. So what I'm going to talk about today, just understand there might be variations, or there are variations of that in the industry. Even within our own building here, some of this stuff's a little bit different. So, and that's just the nature of that. But anyway, because I was new to ISU, I would get emails, and I saw an invite to pitch a session for this New Knowledge Adventures. And at first I was really keyed in on, oh, that's health professions. And I heard that my colleague Tyler, who I'll introduce here in a minute, was doing a session. And so I thought it was for people that had something health related to share to the AARP audience. So I was kind of didn't put a lot of thought into it, but I happened to read some of the course descriptions, and I was like, wait, somebody's teaching how to make chili rellenos, and somebody else this year is doing how to do your own liquor. And I was like, wait, I can play in this game. So this is pre-COVID. I originally talked with Shenna, excuse me, and was asking, do you think that, this distance learning idea would be something interesting? And originally, like Marie mentioned, my thought was to bring people on campus to kind of experience that. And then a side benefit is I get to brag about the PT program that we have here. But anyway, so that didn't work out, obviously, because of COVID, and then they kind of relaunched it. But that was sort of one of my inspiration was I was impressed by what we do here myself. And then I think here's the actual moment that it happened. So about probably 20 years ago, I had a different job at University of Oregon campus, and I was supporting video production students there. And a colleague said, hey, you should come up to the library. We're going to show off this new classroom we have set up, and you can do, I don't know if they called it distance learning, but it was video teleconferencing. And so I remember going up there to see that. And at that time, it was a really basic setup, probably much like we have in the room, which I'll talk about here. It had like a camera to shoot the students and a camera to shoot the instructor. But then there was like a separate control room, and there was a broadcast engineer involved. There was like 3 or 4 people that had done, had a lot of experience in video production and these kind of setup studio productions. And it was kind of like a big endeavor. At least that was my perception of it 20 years ago. Like this was new, great, interesting stuff, and took a lot of expense and things like that. And then since I started this position, I was working on an iPad, and I was controlling cameras in 2 different rooms, 250 miles away. And I could do a whole lot more on you can actually do them on your mobile devices now. And that juxtaposition of seeing a distance learning classroom 20 years ago and now, and I was like, wow, this come a long ways. And so that was kind of what made me think maybe there's an audience out there that would appreciate this. And so that was kind of the backstory of why I pitched this session and why I'm doing it today. So last little housekeeping thing is I am kind of an informal person, if you haven't figured that out yet. And so I would encourage you to ask questions as we go. I have a panel that I'll introduce here in just a second, so you can get their perspectives as well. If you do want to put it in the chat, if you're more comfortable with that, that's cool as well. And likewise, if you want to leave your camera on so I can see it, I dig that, but I'm totally cool if you want to keep your camera off as well. So just try to make it so you get something out of it, because that's probably the most important thing. So any questions before I roll? All right. So that was the slide I should have had up when I did that introduction, but I put the little animation from the Wizard of Oz, because that's another reason that I'm doing this, was kind of to demystify it, right? And in some ways it's flattering when I walk into the room and people kind of take a sigh of relief and, oh, you're here to fix things. But there is a little bit of Wizard of Oz behind it. So for example, if things are going well, my job might be as simple as coming in and using a remote control to turn on TV monitors, and then everything else is automated and it works. But where it does get a little weird is when stuff doesn't go well. And so that's kind of how I feel a little bit, is a little bit Wizard of Oz, like, there's a mystique around it, but, and there's some real, skill involved, but that was sort of another goal, was to kind of demystify some of this stuff. So I have this kind of crazy title, which also adds to the mystique: interactive video conferencing classroom specialist. But that's just the title they gave it. So in general, I support video conferencing for teaching, and specifically at ISU Meridian, where we have a physical therapy program. So carry on. So I'll give you some definitions of distance learning. I don't know that I'm going to make you walk away with the definition, because like I said, it's kind of evolving and there's a lot to it, but I'll certainly refine it and hopefully clarify what that is. We'll talk about some history. And then again, we sort of already alluded to this, how we did it pre-COVID and since COVID, how we made it work here. DL in our case was traditionally between main campus in Pocatello and satellite campus here in Meridian. We do originate instruction from both sites. So a lot of people think, oh, it's just kids sitting in a room watching on video in Meridian. But in fact, we have about equal amount of faculty on both sites. So sometimes instructors will be in Meridian teaching to a live audience and transmitting that to Pocatello, and sometimes vice versa. And I'll talk about how we've sort of modified that and carried on in spite of COVID. Then a big part of this will be the equipment that we use to make all this stuff kind of happen. And then we'll have a panel, and hopefully I'll take your questions. Real quick, I want to introduce that panel, give them a chance to speak. And this is for two reasons. One, so that you don't have to listen to me blabber the whole time. But two, I want you to know who's going to be on this panel, so you might formulate questions for them as well. So first, we have Tyler Jepson, and he is a doctor of physical therapy, and also in progress, if I screw this up, Tyler, correct me, in a PhD program as well. So he teaches PT classes here as well, and then he has a variety of experiences as a practicing clinician and also instructing at other institutions as well. He will also give a different new knowledge adventures session, which I'll let him pitch to you if he wants to. And then I have two students in the classroom you can see under the name Tanberg. That's just a technical thing. Their names are actually Lauren and Jackson. And they're first year physical therapy students. And I kind of asked a couple of folks if we could get a student to participate in this. And so I really encourage you to ask them questions to get their perspective on it, because so I'm 43, just to disclose, and just the way we teach from, when I was in school till now, it can vary quite a bit. So, sometimes we assume things about the new generation that may or may not be true, and vice versa. So I like to have that range of I guess, generations here to help out. So real quick, Tyler, can you tell us where you're from and how'd you end up at ISU, and anything else you want to share?
Sure. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invite. My name is Tyler Jepson. I originally grew up in North Dakota and went to the University of North Dakota, where I got my degree in physical therapy, and then moved to Idaho following an internship at that facility here in Idaho, what was Elks Rehab Hospital, now St. Luke's, and then transitioned into teaching by being an adjunct faculty member at BSU for probably about 5 years before transitioning into full-time teaching. Prior to going into full-time teaching, I specialized in the treatment of geriatric patients, which will be the topic of my New Knowledge Adventure talk next week, Wednesday afternoon. And then also my specialty is vestibular, and so treating patients that have dizziness, which I did throughout the Treasure Valley, and I really enjoyed that. So when I heard that ISU was expanding its PT program from Pocatello to include a campus on Meridian, I thought that would be an awesome opportunity for me, both for my career, but then also because I knew they were developing a PhD program. So I love learning, I love school, I love teaching. And so I made the decision to also go back to school and get a PhD in rehabilitation and communication sciences, which if there wasn't enough to do in my day already, that made it even more compressed, but it's fun. I like it. I think it will help me in the long run. And so, yeah, I'm very informal as well. I'm right on board with Eric. So feel free to ask me anything you want. And again, thank you for having me.
Thanks. Okay, so we're going to double dip here. I'm going to show you a little bit of the technology and also get to hear from these students. So the classroom that those students are in normally would have a view like you guys see, this kind of wide shot. Unfortunately, we can't get the whole room in there. I'm manually remotely controlling this with a little web interface on my computer in front of me. But so typically this is what the far site, the instructor teaching on the other end of the connection, in our case Pocatello for the most part, will see this. But as you can see, if a student asks a question, you don't have echolocation. Everything comes out of one speaker, and so it can be nice if you get a nicer, tighter shot. So this room that their students are in are programmed such that when they push the microphone in front of them, it will zoom into that position. And so we'll demo that real quick. First with Lauren. Lauren can, so you guys can watch the camera. I'm not going to touch anything. Lauren, can you tell us where you're from and how did you get to ISU?
Hi, yeah, I'm Lauren. I was born and raised in Boise and just love the area. I graduated from Boise State last spring and I wanted to stick around, so I was really excited to join ISU in the Meridian campus.
Cool. And then you can see as she lets go of that, it should resettle into a wide shot. There we go. So that's kind of the automation part of it, or one part of the automation is just a technical part. And then we have the same question for Jackson. Tell us where you're from and how'd you end up at Idaho State?
Howdy, I'm Jackson. I am also born and raised in Boise, Idaho. I graduated from Boise State last spring as well. My wife recently got a job at St. Luke's as a nurse, so we were really excited to be able to have her keep that job while I continue my education to get my DPT. So ISU is a great spot for us because we both really like the area, have family here as well. So.
Okay, very cool. And so I'm let that shot resettle. Again, that's all automated. And then I'm gonna, just to make this simpler. So in the future, when these students talk, I put a separate microphone in there just so they don't have to hold their finger on the button. And so I'm resetting the shot just so you guys have, so that audience can see them a little bit closer since the room is not full. And then just so you guys know, Jackson and Lauren, you can use that other microphone there from here out. So, all right, thanks you guys. We'll get back to to them later on in the session too. And guests, you can also, oh, I see a hand. Marie, you got something? Or was that a mistake? I see your hands up in your Zoom window.
My question was, how did you make that happen? Where you pulled them in like that? Yeah,
so a lot of this stuff is going computers nowadays, right? And so most of my equipment is on a network, and most of it has virtual controls. And so next to me, in fact, I could probably put it over in front of the screen space. I have a, do you guys see this controller here I'm waving around?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is just a camera control, virtual one, and I can control the, what they're looking at, or I can control the cameras, which is what we're looking at from my office here. So these guys are just around the corner from me. They're not too far away. Sorry, I just lost my Zoom window now. This is the bumbling part that I didn't want to have happen. Here we go. Anyway, so I control that camera. It has a couple modes. There's an automatic mode, which is kind of what they first demoed, where it doesn't need to be staffed by a person. Again, that's assuming everything works correctly. And those are nice because once the connection's up, it kind of operates like that. It doesn't really need a human in there to intervene. And then I sort of overrode that with a manual control that I have here. So Some classrooms have both options. Some are fully automated, and some are less or not at all automated. Did I answer that well enough for you?
You did. I just was trying to figure out if you had all the fancy equipment and that's why you can do it, because I was
Yeah.
gonna say, that isn't the norm, is it?
Yeah, well, like I said, there's a lot of versions of that, and we'll get into it, and I'll show you some of what makes it separate and unique. But yeah, I would say, what I did there with virtual controls, is technology that's less than 10 years old, or probably close to that, and I think it's just going to get simpler and simpler. In fact,
Yeah.
I fear, not really, but I think positions like mine will probably go away, or certainly become fewer and fewer, simply because it gets more easy and automated to go. So we'll see. I guess there'll always be people that need to fix it. So, all right, here's a definition on your screen of distance learning. That's kind of the catch-all phrase that we use here at ISU, but you might also hear it referred to as e-learning or online learning. Hybrid learning usually encapsulates some kind of distance element. And then I put an asterisk by correspondence course, and I'll explain why that has an asterisk later, but it's basically the idea that you learn something from offsite. So here's another, just Googled some definitions to see what other people say about it. And so techsmith.com, which is an online publication, says distance learning is a way of educating students online. Lectures and learning materials are sent over the internet. Students work from home and not in a classroom. And that kind of hones it down a little bit more. But I like this one from the Britannica, which says it's a form of education in which the main elements include physical separation of teachers and students during instruction and the use of various technologies to facilitate the student-teacher and student-student communication. I like that one a little bit better because, especially because of COVID, we will literally have two rooms that are next door to each other, but because of distancing protocols, where you can only put a certain amount of students in each room, and also you want to keep students within those rooms separated as much as possible. So we'll connect two adjacent classrooms in some cases with the video technology, and even though there are instructors in the next room, we'll use it in that sense. So it doesn't always have to be like a great distance. So anyway, there was another definition. And then it actually predates the internet. They used to do this kind of stuff with some of these other technologies that you can see in that last bullet point, including television, audio, computer transmission through broadcast. In other words, they're using over-the-air technology, just like traditional television. Closed circuit, which means you have a wired, like I'm trying to think of a good, like a security cameras in the traditional way were closed circuit. In other words, they didn't broadcast outside of that facility, but they were all connected in that sense. So closed circuit, microwave or satellite technology, audio conferencing, video cassette. So generally it's has to do with separating your teacher and your audience, and also using technology to kind of bridge that. Maybe I'm going to play this video. Maybe this would be familiar to some of you.
Do you want to make more money? Sure, we all do. So call this free number to find out how easy it is to train at home for a better career. At ICS, more than 10 million men and women have prepared for new careers without setting foot inside a classroom. And now at home in your spare time, you can get your career diploma or even your degree. Choose from any one of these courses: high school TV VCR repair, computer programming, auto mechanics, bookkeeping, learning the personal computer, electrician, legal assistant, animal care specialist, interior decorating, child daycare, medical dental office, gun repair, florist, teacher aide, catering and gourmet cooking, electronics, air conditioning repair, drafting, hotel restaurant management, fitness and nutrition, PC repair, or get your degree. You can major in business management or accounting. Compare your present salary with the money you could be making in any one of these careers. They'll be repeated for you at the end of this commercial, so have your pencil ready to jot down the course you're most interested in. Then call the ICS toll-free number, and we'll send you one of these exciting career packs absolutely free with all the information you need. Here are those courses again, so call today for free information.
Call now for the
You guys get the idea. So that was an infomercial from, I think that's probably in the 90s. I kind of grew up as a kid watching those. Thank you. Rookie mistake, man. I muted my mic during so I didn't get feedback and I forgot to turn it back on. So thanks. So that was a commercial from, I think, the 90s. At least that's my memory of it. How many familiar with that ICS advertising campaign? A few of you. Okay, yeah. So technically that would be a form of distance learning, right? Because you would send off for your materials, you'd get them, you'd study them, you'd take a test, and you'd get your thing. But important, so this is an important distinction. Much like the medical industry goes the way of Medicare, in other words, because it has such a wide grasp, the rules that Medicare says, the rest of the industry kind of follows. And in education, it's just kind of the same thing. So what Sally is pitching there from the ICS, International Correspondence School, technically wouldn't qualify as distance learning for the purpose of federal aid. In other words, the U.S. Department of Education says that in order to distinguish a correspondence class from a telecommunications class or distance learning class, that you must have the bullet point there, regular and substantive interaction between the students and the instructors. And that can be synchronously or asynchronously. Now, to be fair, I've never taken an ICS class, so I don't really know the level of interaction there, but my guess is that it's more like you get the materials and then you take the test and then you get the thing. So it still may be certainly valuable, although I don't know how many people invested in TV VCR repair, but so I'm sort of making fun of that, but technically I would qualify. And I just want to distinguish that there's a lot of flavors of this. A more modern version is the Khan Academy. Who's familiar with that, Khan Academy? Some of you. Okay, so if you're not, I would check it out. It's actually really cool. There's a guy named Sal Khan. He was pretty sure it was an American company, and he was a smart person who I think his own kids or his nephews or something like that were struggling with their math and science classes. And so he made some videos so he could share it with them. And it was popular, and then it kind of shared it with their family and it grew. I'm totally summarizing this story, so you can look up the history. But anyway, it blew up, and to now it's actually a really reputable source. The College Board partnered with the Khan Academy for its AP course prep. In other words, high school kids that are taking the advanced placement courses. Khan Academy is an official partner with that. I just read that Elon Musk gave them a bunch of money. Google's dumped money into them. So they really have a pretty robust training series online. In fact, I think they have a physical presence down in California somewhere now. They actually opened a school. But again, so you can learn a lot that way, but what you don't get particularly is the accountability part of it. There's not a teacher necessarily grading you along the way and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of a distinction, I guess. And for purpose of this, when I talk about distance learning, I'm talking about distance learning that has that regular and substantive interaction. Do you have any questions about that or comments? Anybody else want to throw in on that? So partly my auto cameras are tripping out here. I'll try to get pushed back in on these guys. So partly to, what am I looking for? The word to accommodate that interaction. Most, I would say most college courses, period, but particularly online or distance learning classes also use what's called a learning management system. And that's these logos here. So a learning management system helps, it's software typically, usually server-based. In other words, it lives in a place that's accessible from the internet. And that LMS is used for things like, in the most simple form, delivering content to students, right? So I used Blackboard when I taught at Oregon State, and minimally I would put my syllabus out there, right? So I deliver stuff to students versus printing it out and handing it to them. And mine wasn't even a fully online class. Mine was an in-person class, but I learned quickly that I was wasting paper to hand this stuff out. So I made it available electronically. I delivered it officially through that platform, and it counted as like legit. The students had access to it. Likewise, students can submit content, and maybe the students or Tyler can talk about how you guys utilize that. It can be discussion groups, submitting a paper. It's like a place you can turn in your assignments and things like that. And then also a big component of that is the grade book. You can do attendance tools. So these are kind of, I would say, go hand in hand with online or distance learning tools. Students or Tyler, do you guys have anything to add or say about the LMS?
Yeah, they take a variety of shapes and forms. And I think we're seeing a lot of development of new products that are integrating things like, Google. If anyone is familiar with Google Drive, I think Google's pulling in a platform. If you're teaching I think in a formal academic setting, it's a very necessary, I think, adjunct to what it is you're doing, because you can't just hand someone a piece of paper. You have to deliver this electronic document to them in some way. And email just isn't as conducive to that necessarily as a place where you can store it and it can live there and students can interact with it, and then the instructors can interact with it and grade it, and it makes life a little bit easier.
Great, thanks, Tyler. So just real quick about that, I actually looked into it because these are two of the leading platforms, Moodle and Blackboard. And I made some phone calls to find out exactly why. And I know schools will switch back and forth based on finances and various other reasons. But so Moodle is an open source thing, which means they reveal their code and their backend. And so anybody that has a certain level can actually work on that and modify that and things like that. And so open source things tend to be popular, although not particularly money making. I mean, I'm sure there's people getting paid to support that, but here at ISU, partly because of that, we have, according to our admin, he said we have a 1.5 positions dedicated to supporting Moodle. Faculty might snicker if they're like, oh, if we have a lot of problems with it, maybe we need to dump some more into that. But so anyway, Blackboard is, that's a subscription service. You have to pay to be part of the Blackboard service. Also, we do have to pay. We pay Amazon Web Services. We, as an Idaho State institution, to host our Moodle platform. So there's kind of a back end behind that I'm not going to get too much into, but I do want you to be aware of that term LMS, or Learning Management System. And as Tyler mentioned, understand that it's a pretty integral part. Is there a question in the chat I'm seeing here? Do we have other online tools with LMS to integrate online presentations such as Panopto? Okay, so there's a question there. So Panopto is one that I actually looked into. We saw a demo from them. So there's a lot of companies, software companies, that are trying to get on this bandwagon. And I wouldn't even say a bandwagon, it's a legitimate need, because more and more education is taking advantage of these online tools, whether they're fully distance learning or not. And so we use other tools along with this. So I know our College of, I think it's our pharmacy school, or maybe our PA program, which is down the hall. They use, oh, you know what it is? We have a counseling program on this campus, and they use Panopto for their students. So they have a counseling program where people are training to become professional counselors. And as part of that, they have a clinic where they have to have actual, meetings with people. And those are recorded as per the curriculum. And they use Panopto to help record and organize and store that. Which is actually an interesting point, because of health science stuff, and we face this as well. A lot of these technology decisions have to be informed by whether or not they're HIPAA compliant, right? So I'm trying to think of just an easy example. Well, here's an example. I had a personal health, video health meeting with a provider outside of my work here. And my wife was going to be there as well, but we were on two different sites, and she couldn't facilitate that because the technology she was using could only connect one person to another. And I was like, well, we could do a Zoom meeting. And then she's like, well, that's not a HIPAA compliant resource. And now I will say Zoom can be, there's different tiers of licensing that will make your use of the tool compliant or not. And that has to do with just basically protecting the client's personal material and their health material and their health information. Tyler, you've probably dealt with some of that stuff. Maybe you can give me a better example, not to put you on the spot, but.
That's what I was putting in the chat. So I use a variety of free tools for teaching. So stuff that doesn't necessarily, associate with grades, but are sometimes useful for learning activities. And I put a few in there, such as Kaggle for mind mapping. There's many mind mapping or concept mapping tools, which I really enjoy. There's different sorts of polling options like Socrative. We also have other options. There's these little devices called clicker quizzes. So sometimes we can deploy quizzes online and students can actually get to them on their phone and answer quiz questions on their phone, and it immediately pops up on the screen that we're sharing, which is really fun just to kind of get opinions. What else did I put in there? I also have explored a few other things like Cerigo, but I haven't really dived into that one a whole lot. But you can kind of almost create a lesson plan in there, and students have to kind of almost like go back to it multiple times in order to achieve like certain levels of mastery, which I really like the idea, but it's very time intensive to build on the instructor side. Other coworkers have used what's the one that Cahoots. Cahoots is another polling very similar to Socrative. Those are the ones that immediately come to my mind. Students Excellent. Love to use, and Jackson and Lauren, chime in. Students historically, at least in undergrad, love to use the one that makes flashcards. What's that called? It doesn't work as well as grad school, but
Quizlet.
Quizlet. Thank you. Yep, that's a very, very common one with students where they can put in information or facts, and it kind of automatically generates a question to test your knowledge on that particular fact, and they can essentially build their own quizzes or flashcards within this website. And it looks like it is very open. And so, if I build something, then, someone else in a completely different place, country, program can look at what I built, which kind of makes it nice because it's then crowdsourcing.
Great, thank you. All right, so many people didn't know this, and I actually didn't until I started working here, is the many presences of Idaho State University. So it was founded in 1901 in Pocatello. And that little picture you see in the thumbnail there, let me get my little annotator on here. Whoops, I want my spotlighter, here we go. So this is a famous part of the ISU campus. It was like the first covered college football stadium in the state. But so that's our main campus in Pocatello. Like I said, established in 1901. They've been in Ada County. I should say ISU has been in Ada County since the 1970s, from what I researched. And initially, some of that was for health sciences. And I think specifically it was our pharmacy students were doing their clinical rotations in Boise. And so they had a presence at the VA hospital in Boise, and also the state hospital, which I don't think the state hospital is there anymore, but the VA certainly is. And so that gave us a presence here in Ada County. It's bounced around a few different locations, and it landed here in Meridian in this decade, but I don't remember the exact date. But in 2018, which was the same year that the PT program came to Meridian, and to be clear, PT was always an option in Pocatello, or at least for a long time has been an option. But PT came to Pocatello in 2018, and that was the same year that it was renamed and rebranded Sam and Elaine Skaggs, which you might recognize that name Skaggs from Skaggs Market, Skaggs Pharmacy. So they're like a, made their wealth on in the pharmacy business with their chain of grocery and pharmacies. And they became the primary donors to rebrand this building. And so 2018, the end of that year is when I came. And I would say I've seen a lot of growth just in those few years, like physical growth of the building and also some expansion of programs. We have a presence in Twin Falls on the College of Southern Idaho, which is a community college down there. And then we have a small campus in Idaho Falls. And so just to be clear too, not all of ISU's programs are offered on all of the campuses. And so Meridian, for example, tends to focus on graduate level health sciences, although there is occasion where an undergraduate will make their way into here. So, oh yes, and so two distance learning related things is our physician assistant program, which is a graduate level program down the hall from where I work. They have a relationship with the College of Idaho. So if you take the PA program at College of Idaho or at Idaho State, you're taking the same classes. There's a partnership there, and that partnership works largely because of distance learning. And likewise, University of Alaska has a partnership with our pharmacy program. And so we're routinely transmitting and receiving course content in the pharmacy program up into Alaska. So there's maybe a where we can go. Now, the reality is we can connect to anybody else that has these kind of technology tools, because it's all piped through the internet these days versus microwave trucks and things like that. So real quick, here's just a real basic concept of how traditional distance learning worked. We had 2 sites in this example, and students would be in those buildings, and they would receive their training either with an in-person instructor or from the far site transmitting to them. And I say in real time, and that's just like what we're doing here. So I don't need to beat that over your head, but that's like a traditional way. And then it works with a thing called the bridge. It's bridged. And in this case, Zoom is bridging this meeting here. So we've got physical students in a classroom joining us, but we've called into Zoom's architecture, and Zoom is bridging this call. And that's sort of just a simplified look at how distance learning works in what I call the traditional way. And that's traditional for ISU. Other people might have done it different ways from the get-go. And I'll talk about some of the technology that actually makes that work, because it is quite involved in order to allow students to talk to their instructors in real time and things like that. So here's an example of that. This was a pre-COVID actual class shot with one of our physical therapy instructors. And you could see, in this case, he was up at the front room lecturing to a live audience. The physical therapy cohorts are 24 students. So there's 24 students here in the Meridian campus. And then you can see on this monitor in the background, there's the 24 students on the Pocatello campus. What you don't see is opposite of this instructor in the back of the room is a camera on the wall that's shooting an image of him and transmitting it to those students in Pocatello. And likewise, there's a monitor on the back of this wall, which shows a duplicate of this monitor here. So in other words, he can always see his live audience and his far site audience, his distant audience. And then this monitor here, the way we have it set up, will show the PowerPoint or whatever he or she wants to share, just in the same way I'm sharing the screen with you. And those can all be customized and tweaked, and sometimes we do that. So this was pre-COVID. You can see they're tight. In the front of the room, there's 6 we call high-low tables. That's like a main tool of physical therapy. So they would get some content presented to them, and then they'd break out, and they would go spread out in these rooms. They practice the technique. This is me doing physical therapy. And then they would do stuff like, okay, providers rotate, right? And so everybody the patients will stay on the bed, and the students will rotate around, and that gives them a opportunity to work on different body types and things like that. And then in the back of this room, there's 6 more beds. So we put all 24 students in a room this big, and that's how they would do it. And of course, COVID changed all that. It's a screenshot from one of the actual classroom cameras, so the quality of the image is not that great, but you can see this is that exact same room from the reverse angle. So there's the monitor in the back of the room that I mentioned. You can see the shadow of that camera. That instructor that you saw was standing approximately up here teaching, but we've removed all of the tables and to create space. We've put 6 beds in here and spread them out. And and of course, everybody's masked, which was a way that we could still carry on with our education and be compliant and safe with the recommendations and the protocols of the program. So PT was one of the programs. We had to get kind of a medical exception because, of course, when COVID happened, everybody stopped going. And even our classes were fully online for a while, but at some point in a physical therapy program, you got to be able to touch people. And so our team, and I can't speak to this because I wasn't involved in it, but advocated and went through a bunch of hoops and to get it so that we could get students back at some capacity. And so this is how we've done things since the fall, and we'll carry on like this at least through the summer. But just so you know, right now, ISU has a plan to go back to the traditional way in the fall of this year. So anybody else want to say anything about that or questions about that? Students, I want to give you a chance. I haven't heard from you. You guys have anything to say, or are you guys grooving in there? Lauren and Jackson. You don't have to. I just want to make sure.
It's kind of interesting to see the classroom as it was before COVID. Because those two classrooms, that's the same classroom, just at two different viewpoints, right? And so it is so interesting to see all of those students in the one classroom. To me, it looks so crowded because I'd never seen it like that before, but I see how it'd be. I'm excited to see this fall if we are in person and normal as this would be, and I'm really excited for that. But it's been interesting to be separated as we were.
Cool. Well, here's my next shot is a kind of example of maybe more like what Jackson's used to. So on these top two frames, this is a split screen view of one class, one course, I should say, but it's taking place in 4 different classroom spaces. So on the top, these are 2 rooms in Meridian, which literally are adjacent. Like if I go through this door up here in the upper, where you see my mouse, that'll take you into this room over here. And these are both pretty large rooms, and under normal conditions could pretty easily put 24 students in there. But because of COVID, we've had to kind of spread out, and luckily we've had the real estate to be able to do that. And so this, you can see half of the Meridian cohort is here, and half of them is in this room. And another change we made is we've paired them up, so the students work with the same student partner for most of the course as much as possible. Disadvantages, and maybe one of the people that does physical therapy can speak to this, is they don't get to work on different body types. Some point in their career and their training they will, but that was a kind of a sacrifice we had to make, is to reduce how many people are interacting with each other. We try to keep them separated in rooms, and also within those rooms separated as well. And then on the bottom here is a shot of the Pocatello rooms, which are also adjacent to each other. And here you can see the instructor. So these students in this room, if they looked up on their monitors, they would see a full screen of this right here. And then they would also have a separate monitor that has that instructor's content on it. And again, originally when I thought this was going to be a live demo and you could look around the room and see what I'm talking about, but this will be a substitute. Any questions?
Does the PT department need any volunteers?
Perhaps. Send me your email. I'll pass it on, because they do have certain occasions for that. And I could put you in touch with the people that coordinate that. But
Okay, I want to volunteer. I'm asking.
we actually do have a clinic that's open to the community. If it's not open yet, it's going to be real soon here. So if you're ever at the ISU Meridian campus, or if you've never been, come check it out, and you can get seen. I don't want to speak to it because I don't know all the ins and outs, but there is a possibility that you could get treated by Jackson and Lauren someday soon.
Okay.
I'm going to move into some of the technology real quick. The obvious ones that you'd go see in the room that we've probably already seen here is the cameras. Well, you haven't seen them, but you've seen what they do. And in our setup, so we have 3 classrooms that we control. The one that Lauren and Jackson are in, and then the 2 that are in the screenshots. And I say those are like PT spaces versus general university spaces. And that's a fortunate thing, because then we can modify, rearrange, tweak, and work within that space as much as we want without having to consider, oh, what are the nursing students going to need that space for? So having dedicated space is pretty cool and good to have. Not every space in ISU is that. Like some are dedicated to specific programs, but some are general. And so anyway, so within our 3 PT controlled rooms, you'll easily see 2 to 5 cameras. One of our rooms has 5 cameras in it. And you'll find these kind of touch panels. This one has physical buttons as well as virtual buttons, but that could vary from room to room, and also brand to brand and things like that. So this isn't an actual one that we have, but this is an example. And then because of it's a virtual interface, these can be highly customized and programmed. So like this one has a document camera on it. Not all of our rooms have document cameras. This one's got a DVD player on it. Not all of our rooms have DVD player, but this is kind of, I'd say, standard classroom, at least college classroom infrastructure is a touch panel. And that allows the instructor to have some control over what's getting put up on the screen or not. And it gets a little bit more complex when you're adding far sights and distant stuff. We have microphones in the room, which the students demonstrated the wired mics. You can perhaps see that in the shot. So they're either going to be tethered to the desks, like in the classroom that those students are in, or in the other room that's on wheels. I'll go back to that shot real quick. You'll note nothing in here in this room is attached, right? And that's intentional so that you can move the space around. I'm sitting on a bolster that students found not very popular, but so we have a lot of mobile furniture and things like that. And again, that's intentional. So in an environment like that, it's much better to have wireless microphones. And so we have wired and wireless microphones depending on the space that you're in. A projector, speakers, and monitors are also kind of the obvious parts that you'll see. Projector obviously puts content on the screen. They're pretty low maintenance. They do have lamps that burn out, and that's kind of the main thing you have to watch for that. The other thing to think about, as I should have put numbers by all these, but just think in your head the expense of all this stuff, right? And most of this, it's not like a class speaker you get for your home. Like they're commercial grade pieces of equipment, so they have quite a bit of expense to them. Wireless access point is if you have wireless mics in the room, they transmit to what's called a wireless access point, and then from there it's tethered to the wall back to the kind of the hub, which I'll show you guys here in a minute. Wireless things need to have batteries and or chargers, so maybe charging station. And then a lot of these rooms have a variety of remote controls that can get crazy and confusing. So this is sort of getting into my world, what I work with. These are
Eric, does most of that equipment get outdated quickly, just like computers?
Yeah, and that's a challenge, right? Like in fact, the codec, which is a piece of equipment you can see on my highlight here, this is an obsolete one. And in other words, it'll still work and we can still use it, but the company that makes it no longer supports that. So its shelf life is finite. We'll get what we can out of it because they're expensive equipment. But yeah, that's a huge consideration. Like, your budget influences what you can and cannot get. And so you kind of want to build it future-proof, but you also have to consider, what's the shelf life of this stuff? So that's a great question. So in these equipment racks, you can see a rack is just kind of standard. You'll see these in IT environments and in computer environments. This is a little bit shameful of a wiring scheme here. Like there's sort of a machismo in the industry of having tidy wires, and mine aren't super tidy. I probably should redress those, but I'm going to talk about some of this equipment, which is in the room, but you may not always necessarily see, although there's one of those touch panels that I mentioned. So all the microphones have to go through what's called a DMP, a digital mixing processor in this case. And so the room that the students are in, there's actually 3 of these in the rack. You can see them here, 1, 2, 3 on the bottom. And each one can take, I think, 8 microphone inputs. And because there's a lot more microphones that you have to have 3 of those. And so the desks that they're sitting in front of, or that they're sitting at, are wired into these inputs. And then this has a virtual interface where you can tweak each signal, each input on that. And I'll just give you a quick glimpse of that. It can get kind of crazy and complicated. And to be honest, I don't spend that much time in here because we don't do a lot of processing of sound, right? I try to fix problems, but I'm not trying to make these guys sound like, pop stars, right? So, but you can put filters, virtual filters on here. If you know anything about audio production, a lot of that's done on a virtual interface like this. And then each input is routed to a specific output, right? And so a lot of what I do is understanding signal paths and what kind of cable carries what kind of signal. And so my experience in sports, in particular, sports broadcasting, has actually been helpful in that regard, is because I'm not crazily intimidated by looking at a rat's nest of wires. I know how to kind of approach that. So that's a DMP, usually for audio purposes, and again, controlled with a virtual interface these days. Each of those cameras that I showed you has both some hardware on the back end that it's connected to and another virtual interface. And I have that open up here in my room. And so a lot of what I'll do is I'll have the class running on my same space I'm sitting right here. And I'm kind of half listening in on the content. And, if an instructor is going to demo something, I'll try to follow him or her, or switch the camera to get them the right view. Sometimes we're in communication ahead of time, so I know what they're going to do. Other times I'll just say, call for the shot. And so they'll say, hey, I'm going to demo this, give me the overhead camera. And so in that case, it's more like a director operator kind of relationship. And again, that's kind of unique to what we're doing here. Not every classroom has a dedicated full-time person to do that kind of stuff. So I think we're pretty lucky to have that. And also, in absence of that, then you go to automation, which is less customized, but sometimes is enough to do what you need to do. This is a pretty expensive piece of equipment. It's called a switcher, and it basically routes all your AV sources. So, for example, a classroom will have 3 to 5 monitors in it, right? And I think I showed you guys that. One monitor is going to show the far sight audience. One monitor is going to show the instructor. One monitor is going to show the content that they're putting on the computer. And this is the device that actually does that work. So again, this is the bottom shot is the back side of it. It's a lot of inputs and outputs. And then the top is basically a source and a destination. I'll jump back real quick to my rack. You can see I have mine labeled so that I can more quickly get to that. But again, they're pretty customizable. So that's a switcher that's involved in this technology. And then the codec. This is the piece I mentioned that's no longer supported by the company. The codec's kind of the engine of all this. So the word codec is literally a combination of code and decode. And what it's doing is taking the video signal and it's decoding it to make it a picture on the screen. And it's doing that with multiple sources and multiple destinations. So the codec's pretty important. That's kind of like every classroom has to have a codec to do that work. And then the output of that codec will feed into that switcher, which was the other device. And then it kind of tells it where to go. And again, most of this has virtual interfaces where you tweak and set up and sometimes automate a lot of these processes. Any questions? I'm kind of blabbering here. So as I put that slide together, I thought, let me put these all on one slide. So this is just kind of an example of the equipment that I deal with on a daily basis. And like I said, on a good day, if everything's working, my job might be as simple as turning the TVs on and giving a microphone to an instructor, or even less than that, right? And so, but you can see there's potential for things to go wrong and or change or update. And so that's where you have these more robust distance learning systems. And because of that, go ahead. I hear a question, comment.
Yeah, Eric, I had a quick question. Do you need the codec at the broadcasting and receiving site, or do you just need it at one or the other?
Good question. So in our setup, every classroom that has DL capabilities has its own codec. And so I could call from the room you're in. I can initiate a call to another codec directly. But in our case, what we typically do is we call a third party, a bridge, right? Which is it's a server, basically a computer server. And that, if you're direct room to room, has some advantage. It's simple. It takes out extra piece of equipment, but that limits what I can do remotely. So in our cases, we're almost always we didn't always do this. So Tyler might be, what are you talking about? But the last year or so we've moved to, we use all of our rooms will dial into a common bridge, but when I say that, the codecs are still involved. They're doing the dialing, but they're not communicating directly. They're directing to a bridge. And that gives me some of the extra control where I can turn off a classroom that they're not going to use, or I can help figure out where the noise is coming from. But indeed, a codec it currently is in every room that's involved in DL. Zoom and some of these newer technologies are changing that. We're going to talk about that next. Any other questions?
So hopefully your home doesn't look totally like all of this. That's a little scary.
No, I'm pretty particular about keeping my cables wrapped nicely, but other than that, I don't get too crazy. Let's see. So I'm looking in the comments here. I haven't been watching the chat, so my apologies. So we answered that question. Oh, that's Tyler's answer to Ward. Okay, you guys are on that. Okay, let me know if something comes in the chat because I'm not really watching. So Zoom was used prior to COVID, but here's some interesting data here. Oops, I got to click on it properly. So December 2019, there were 10 million daily users. Just a few months later, in March of 2020, there were more than 200 million users. That's according to an article I read in The Verge. So, you don't have to be really good at math to see that from 10 million to 200 million in a matter of 3 months, 4 months, is pretty significant. And so I kind of learned Zoom along with a lot of other people. I'd done it a handful of times in the job prior to COVID. But of course, when we all got sent home, and just so you know, we had the very first, we're ground zero for Idaho's COVID case. It was just about a year ago. We got an email that said, go home. It was a Friday it was a Friday. And then the next day, the governor was announcing, hey, we've had our first case of COVID. So I think that was probably good. Like a silver lining of that is I for sure got keyed up on it and tuned into it a little more closely earlier on, I think. And I feel like at least the Meridian campus, I feel like is bought into the safety protocols and the seriousness of it pretty early on. And I think that helped us bounce back and carry on. I remember Tyler was going to go to Disneyland and I walked into him and I said, hey, Disneyland closed, man. And then the NCAA tournament closed, and it happened just about a year ago today. So Zoom definitely changed the game. And now we're talking about coming back. And I watched the town hall with the university president, and now they're going to have to deal with instructors that say, hey, I dig this. Like I've found this to be useful. And this is not just education, but there's a lot of industries that are kind of battling that, like, hey, we learned a new way to do this. And so I think it's going to continue to grow and be part of our world. And so similarly, Zoom simplifies it because it does a lot of that back end work. You can call in as an individual user. This person can use a variety of technology. They can use a mobile device to access Zoom, laptops to access Zoom. So it gives some flexibility on it that your classroom, you've invested tens of thousands of dollars into may not offer because, we can't do that because we don't have this. Whereas, if you make your platform accessible, you grow typically. Zoom still can connect to buildings, which is literally what we're doing in this space, as we've talked about. There are other players in the virtual kind of world. One we use a lot is WebRTC. And again, that's partly cost-based. So WebRTC is an open source platform, and it's designed to work well with internet browsers. And so pre-COVID, we would lean on that because it was easy to send a link to students, say, go to this web browser, log in, here you go. And now, since almost everybody has Zoom anyways, we don't have to say, well, download this Zoom app, create an account, authenticate, then you can go to your meeting, right? We can kind of assume all that part. And so now Zoom's becoming, I think, more preferred, and Zoom has chat and other features and things like that too. Go to meetings, one you might have heard of, DoxyMe. This is the one I mentioned when I had a virtual health appointment using this, and was frustrated because supposedly my wife couldn't couldn't join us from offsite. So there are other players in that, and of course it's a capitalist society, so they'll be competing for your business. But these are all things we can talk about real quick. The future, I got a data point on this. I am kind of going longer than I thought, but real quick. So when COVID happened, we had these little owl devices. Let me click these on here and then we'll watch a quick video on this. I'll talk about it in a second.
You got your mic off, Eric.
Thanks. Did it again, man. Usually I just use my webcam mic, but I use a stick mic today as a separate button. So anyway, that was a marketing video for Owl Laboratories. It doesn't actually tell you that much because it's a marketing video, but it's a little mobile standalone device. It's got speakers, cameras, and microphones all built into it. And has anybody ever used one of these or familiar with these?
No, the maker is called Owl.
Owl Laboratories, I believe, is the company. And I haven't used one personally, but I know ISU invested in these. We bought 350 of these after COVID hit because, like I said, not all of our rooms were using this technology. PT was fortunate that we were already using video conferencing at some level, and so it wasn't a huge jump to change that for students. And I'll talk about some research that kind of hammers that in, but I put this as the future. This is actually, these are available now, as are these, but I think what we're moving to is instead of those, component-based systems where you've got a $4,000 piece of equipment tied to a $2,000 piece of equipment tied to a fourth, now it's kind of these all-in-one kind of systems, which makes sense. And that's what technology does. It makes our lives simpler, hopefully. And there's some trade-offs. For example, my boss who works for ETS on campus, he said the word on the street is that these owl things have not been very popular. In other words, they're supposed to be neat. And I watched a couple of demos online, but they're totally automated. So they have like echolocation, so the shot will change. There's a 360-degree camera up here, which sounds really cool, but how they work is maybe not precise, I guess is a good way to say it. And so, they're being used, but, they're way cheaper than what we have. But I would offer that the system we have is more customizable, I think, and hopefully gives the people better experience. But I think these things will just continue to get better, and we'll see this kind of stuff as we carry on. Real quick, I got one more slide. I'm losing my crowd. I want to get a chance to talk to you guys, but here's one of our faculty members who's been a doctor of physical therapy for a long time, but recently completed an EDD degree in educational leadership and was kind of wrapping up his program when COVID hit. And so he changed his thesis specifically to study the effects of switching from a synchronous video conference, what I called the traditional way, to the hybrid model. And so basically he did a qualitative research, a case study. I think Jackson and Lauren were part of the class, I think. Anyways, he focused in on a specific cohort of physical therapy students and faculty, and did a standardized research surveys and things like this. And kind of here's what he found. I'm kind of bumbling his research, but what he found from his study, and again, this is a small sample, but interesting and relevant to us because it was our people involved. He found that the students found the change from the traditional way they did it to the hybrid. Most students felt that they were not adversely affected by the technology change. In other words, you suddenly tell somebody they can't just come sit down in a classroom and watch. Now you got to use Zoom, you got to dial in, you got to deal with internet bandwidth, a lot of the technical issues that come with doing it a different way. Most of our students felt, according to his survey, that was minimally disruptive or minimally adverse, right? In other words, they handled that well. And that's, not that crazy. Like young people, the perception is that, oh, they all know how to do technology and they'll adapt well. So that's not terribly surprising, but also affirming in that, cool, they handled that part of it. Most of the students felt they got decent hands-on skills in spite of the change. And again, I think this was a 1 semester study that he kind of assessed on. Most of the students felt that the change from the methods, the way they did it, had a minimal adverse effect on their future. Now, again, these are perceptions, right? These could all be different, and they're going to be like 10 years from now, like, man, COVID screwed up my life, but currently, when he did his study, the students felt that it was not terribly detrimental to their future prospects. In fact, maybe even be good for them because they're learning, stuff that they may have to deal with in the future, right? Most students reported increased stress and more distractions from learning at home. And then Dr. Gerber's study also found this about the faculty, which I found as interesting. Faculty found that it increased their prep time, and maybe Tyler can talk about that, that the faculty felt that the skills of the students as far as hands-on stuff was decreased, right? Because they didn't get to physically witness them doing stuff or coach them in a way, right? And so again, that's not particularly surprising, I wouldn't think, but it is affirming. And it's interesting that the students didn't feel that they were affected that way. The faculty sure did, right? And so again, remains to be seen if these things come true, but I still think it's informative to our world. And then, faculty found that they had less reliance on their charisma. So I would probably bomb at that because I'm not one that scripts out my things so tightly. I kind of rely on the jokes and the tossing it to Tyler and stuff. And then this one is interesting to me too, is the faculty felt decreased student interaction, but better name recognition. And that's interesting too, because I can look on the screen and I can see there's Rachel and there's Shanna and there's Marie, right? And so the faculty learn their students' names actually better than in the traditional way, because they're always looking at their name and their picture associated with the name right on the Zoom screen. And then another thing that I didn't put in here that Dr. Gerber reminded me of was, so typically we always had a cohort in Pocatello and a cohort in Meridian, and they all got the same instruction and they're theoretically getting the same experience. But what they learned from this study was that they function more as one, right? Whereas before, like the Meridian cohort would jive and get to know each other pretty well, and the Pocatello cohort would do the same, but there wasn't a lot of mixing, right? Well, now they're all mixing in this way, is my weird visuals. But so that was an interesting thing that came out of Dr. Gerber's study was it felt more cohesion as a cohort, a single cohort versus two sort of separated ones. So, oh yeah, I did have that in a bullet after all. Okay, this is a goofy error on my slide, but I'm kind of done. So I want to open it up to our remaining participants. If anybody wants to say anything or ask questions, let's do it.
Just from my perspective, I've seen students. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you?
Go ahead.
From my perspective, I've seen students have a great increase in flexibility and access for class, during class. Sick kiddos, they need to be at home. They can be on a Zoom meeting, which would not necessarily be conducive if they were required to be in the classroom. So There's advantages and disadvantages to the system. It does seem to level the playing field in a way between, across campuses. And I think we're going to see a lot of classes that were purely lecture before continue to be delivered over Zoom because of the advantages that it may present. But that's going to be up to the individual instructor typically. But I think a lot of us, feel that Zoom gives us that flexibility with the purely lecture portions.
Are they recorded? Are the classes recorded generally?
Yep, I frequently, that's the great thing is I can record anything on Zoom. I can post it online later or give only certain people access to it if they happen to miss lecture because the power went out, which has totally happened, and then they can just make up that time. Which the classrooms that Jackson and Lauren are in, that the traditional way that we were doing it pre-COVID, that can also be recorded and usually is recorded as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But
So
the one thing that isn't there in the traditional classroom is Zoom has this chat function.
Mhm.
And one thing that I have seen the students do is almost engage more via chat than they would have in the traditional the traditional DL classroom pre-COVID, because there's no way for Lauren and Jackson right now to chat with me within that software. They would have to use a different piece of software to do that, and we're not really set up in a great way for that outside of Zoom. So, but if I'm lecturing right now, they can just send me a public or a private chat, and as I'm lecturing, it's a skill you have to develop. I can read the chat while I'm lecturing and then just seamlessly incorporate their comments into whatever it is I'm lecturing about.
Mhm. So the research showed that there's more prep time from your perspective for each class. What does that feel like? What causes it to be more? Just because you have to think about the technology, or is there something else at play there?
No, that's exactly it. So I actually just conducted my first continuing education course that I taught this past weekend. And traditionally that was an all in-person course. And there are many paper handouts historically, and there's actually a test that these PTs have to take that I then have to look at and grade. And converting all of that into an online, completely online format is very interesting. So you have to think about, okay, how am I going to deliver this document to these students? Or, I can't have them do, a small group activity. So if Jackson and Lauren are in that classroom with 22 of their classmates, it's really easy for me to say like, okay, we're going to break up into groups of 4 and you guys are going to work through this case study. We can do that through Zoom. It just takes, we have to create a breakout room and we have to think, then how am I going to deliver that document or that particular information to, to that group? So it is a lot more retooling our entire lesson plan in our brain to make it conducive to being completely online, which usually does mean we have to do more prep work in the beginning. So, making the copies, setting it up to be released, emailing them out, loading it to the learning management software system, such as Moodle or Google Drive, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the past, usually if I'm lecturing in Meridian, I have a counterpart faculty member in Pocatello. It was very common for us to okay, I send my coworker the document and they hand out the paper copy of it. And we can't do that over Zoom. And so that part has to be, that part has to be thought of. And sometimes, if we're doing a role-playing activity, I want one student to get this certain document, but I want this other student to get a different document. And coordinating that electronically is a little bit more complicated and time consuming.
Jackson and Lauren, how does it feel to you? I realize that you guys, you just graduated from BSU last year, I think, and so that may have been traditional. And then now into a whole new part of your career, a whole new part of your education. How does it feel to you to be in a DL at this point?
So yeah, almost all if not all of my Boise State career was traditional on campus in classroom, except for, last March when we all went over Zoom. That was my first kind of experience with distance learning. And of course, that was with people or the professors and all the students were inexperienced with it at that point. So there were lots of technical difficulties to work through. And exactly as Dr. Gerber's, thesis showed, was that there were more distractions and more prep time on the professors there. Here, it's kind of, I was expecting to have not a similar experience, but I was expecting to be there like some technical difficulties, which there are some, but very minimal. And I was expecting to see some more issues in classroom, but after going through last semester here and up to now at this semester, it's been so seamless, I guess. Yeah, it's funny. I don't even feel like when I'm in class, it doesn't even really feel like I'm in like a distance learning because it's so easy to follow along with the professor and it's so easy to ask questions when needed. It is a little difficult at first to get used to interrupting the professor because most of the time, if I raise my hand and the professor's not on the campus, then they won't see me raise my hand because it's a small screen that they're looking at that they would see me through. So sometimes I would just have to pipe up and interrupt them mid-sentence, which does take some getting used to at first, but it's gotten easier over the time and the professors are all great about it, so.
Great. Cool.
I actually, all through middle school, I was in an online school, and then through high school, I was dual enrolled. So half my classes were online and half were at like your traditional public school. And then probably most of my semesters in college, I had at least like one elective class or something that was online. So I had a lot of experience with it going into last March, and I was definitely in classes where the teachers weren't used to teaching online, so there were a lot of hiccups, but I've kind of gotten a cool perspective where I've gotten to see the technology evolve throughout my education. And I definitely came here thinking there's probably going to be lots of barriers and bumps to like having this distance learning. But yeah, I'm really grateful for Eric and Ian because they coordinate everything so well, and there is no, I don't feel like there's any barrier to learning what we need to learn, seeing what we need to see, all of that. Everything's thought through really well by the faculty, so it's been a really great experience coming here for sure.
Great.
Hey, thanks for the plug there. I appreciate that. And she mentioned Ian. So I have a counterpart in the Pocatello campus that does support what I do. But I kind of a follow up to that, Lauren and Jackson, if you guys want. So I know that there's like 250 some PT programs in the country, or between 250, 300 as I recall. And I'm curious, when you guys were looking at PT programs and you found this campus, I'm just curious how much of an influence, deterrent, or attraction the fact that you're on a split campus. Like, how did that get sold to you? Hey, it's in Pocatello, but you'll be in Meridian. And I'm pretty sure you guys get an option at least to make your preference one way or the other. So I'm kind of curious, how did that split campus DL component, did it weigh into your decision of where to apply and where to attend or not? Did it have a role, or can you guys talk about that?
Yeah, since I didn't have very much background in distance learning, the distance learning of having the distance learning at Meridian and Pocatello at ISU's PT program was kind of a hindrance to me. It wasn't necessarily something that I thought was overall a negative. I just thought that I would prefer a more face-to-face interaction. So at first I was kind of against it and I didn't really like the idea of it. I wasn't totally, all against it in a sense that I wouldn't come here, obviously, because I'm here. But after going through it, I actually see a lot more positives than negatives with it, because being able to connect the two campuses is really, really beneficial, especially in our lab courses. So right now we're going through a bunch of manual therapy techniques in our musculoskeletal management course. And being able to have 4 physical therapists attached to 48 students, so 24 students in Pocatello and in Meridian, and then 2 physical therapists in Pocatello and 2 in Meridian, is really beneficial because we get such a wide range of viewpoints, not only from the PTs, but also from the students in general. So I would say, like, at first, I was definitely hesitant to like this idea of distance learning, but now that I've experienced it, it is so interesting because sometimes in Meridian, a viewpoint will be brought up and we get to share that with Pocatello, or vice versa, that the other campus didn't think about. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I think I would just say I didn't know much about it. Like, I had read about it a little bit, but it was after talking to a second-year student that I was like, oh yeah, like, it probably won't be a big barrier. It's like worth the shot, I guess. I didn't know enough about it for it to be a deterrent or a draw, but yeah, I can definitely see it growing and continuing on more campuses just because it is so beneficial to see all those viewpoints.
Hey, we're getting on our time. Tyler had to check out. I'm happy to hang out if anybody wants to lollygag, but I don't want to tie up the students. So I'll give one last shout out for final thoughts.
Well, I see it
Lauren has
as,
a
I see
question.
pros, lots of pros to this. I think it's going to be a way of life for a while. And I think having people who are getting into this field adjust to it sets them up for whatever's coming. And we don't know what's coming. And you don't know what's coming in the future either. So if you've already been there, done that, I think you'd be more ready. So I see this as such a positive for the students to learn this way, to carry on for the future. I mean, for their jobs, period. Because it's probably going to happen sometime in your job and you're ready now. You don't have to get all geared up for it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this with us. Absolutely.
Mr. Biagni, what do you got?
Well, sorry to jump in so late. It was more of a kind of a question, as you mentioned, and Marie, you've just sort of wrapped it up here, how the tech is going to change the future. My question is a little bit is to the students, and it might be maybe a reflection more as to what you experienced in your undergrad time, and that's the economics of this. Do you feel like what you're paying for right now for your education should perhaps have a modification because you're into this mode of learning versus how it was traditionally? Should there perhaps be a scaled tuition or fee to I'm going to do it all online versus it's all, synchronous in-person instruction? Should there be a balance or a balancing of that price point, if you will?
I think that's a great question. I know my little brother right now, he's at Boise State, and he's all online, well, mostly online. I think he's got a couple of courses that are in person because of labs. And I feel like that scaling of tuition is it's like an interesting concept because obviously the college still needs to pay for the professors, but I do see the issue in the sense that the experience that you're getting as a student is not as fulfilling if you can't be on campus in person. However, here at ISU, it's a different story in the sense that we're distance learning not simply to get us off of campus. That's more like the COVID protocol, is to get everybody off of campus and use distance learning as the second case. But at ISU, that was the primary case where we're distance learning so we can connect the two campuses. And that way, we have an equal amount of faculty here and at Pocatello. And because of our lab courses, we actually get more perspective on each case. If we're going through like learning manual techniques, we get more perspective on each case because we have more faculty, more students. Of course, being in person might be more interactive for the therapist to the student to faculty relationship. But if we had 48 students here in Meridian and we were all in person, I doubt we would have 4 faculty members to be with us with all 48 students. So we actually I think we would have a better student to faculty ratio the way we do it now versus if we were all in the same location. So I think it is a major pro to have us in distance learning. But in terms of an undergrad situation, I can definitely see the argument for a decreased tuition, especially if you're not using all of the facilities that the campus offers, such as the dining hall or the gym that they offer with your tuition. I know that when I was at Boise State last spring, when they closed the gym, and I was only there for a couple months once it closed down, but I'm like, I want to get some money back for not being able to use some of these facilities, And then when they started last fall, the whole campus was closed and, they still couldn't go to the gym and all this. So I can definitely see the argument for that in a more traditional college sense. But in this setting, I feel like the distance learning is definitely more of a pro than it is a con.
If I may, with what you just said there, do you feel that, let's say, like in the synchronous, in presence learning, some of the shyer students maybe don't ask that question, and perhaps this environment opens that up more to be a little bit more inclusive for the person who, isn't always at the front of the class. They're the ones hiding in the back and they're trying to ask, but they might feel a little bit more shy. That shyness. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say at first it is pretty difficult to ask the questions just because there's no way to signal the professor if they're not on your campus that you have a question. So if they're lecturing and a question comes into your head, you have to interrupt them, which is something that I actually think could be addressed really easily with some kind of signal that the professor would get. But almost everybody in the class here has gotten used to being able to ask a question when it's needed and just interrupt the professor, because all of them are so open and they're so interactive with the students. And most of the professors do give time to ask questions once they've been talking for a little bit. They make sure that each student they make sure that the students don't have any questions before they move on. And for shyer students who it may take more time to get used to, interrupting the professor that way. But I believe that in this graduate setting that most students are out to get the education that they need. And if questions come into their head, they're willing to ask those questions.
I think in the future, there will be some type of negotiation on money. I mean, my background is business and sales. So I look at it as what you're selling me is possibly that I want all the amenities that I have paid for. And if I don't get all of that, then maybe I should be getting some kind of a cut in the price. I mean, that to me is a business situation. And yes, these buildings are built and you've got to put the lights on and you got to pay the people. But in reality, I signed up for something and I'm not getting exactly what I signed up for. Maybe they're going to have some kind of cut financially for people who say, but I'm not getting, exactly the 100% what I signed up for. But I think we're going to have to see how all these people end up coming out of these classes and feeling like they got the same education, even doing the hybrid or, one or the other. That's not the norm.
Yeah, I think you guys have made good points. And I just want to kind of emphasize that is DL can be different things to different people. When I was an adjunct at Oregon State, we had a faculty meeting and they were like, hey, pitch, create an online course, right? And it very much was, no secret, a cash cow, right? Because I could repackage what I do and I can send it out. Now there is some accountability part of that. You got to grade it. You got to, but and so when I took this job, that's what I thought. I was like, why would Idaho State out in Pocatello, which is, the eastern part of the state, have this thing here. And at that time we had a cohort of 24. And I kept seeing like, well, we're not really making money because we got 24 students and we got 4 or 5 faculty here, and we grew that. Of course, now we have 3 cohorts going because it's a 3-year program. But early on, especially, I was like, they're not saving money by doing this. I'm a full-time position. I had a full-time position over there. So I learned that this mode that we're doing, it wasn't about money. And just to throw in there, but I totally get that some are, and there's no secret about it. So and they're great questions that both you guys are asking. But the other thing I want to say is another perk is you can take distance learning into rural areas, right? Assuming they've got internet and stuff. And that's one thing I know they're finding out is like, you're actually kind of opening up education. I just applied to and got accepted into a program at Boise State that's fully online DED program. And I was nervous about it for these reasons. Like I thrive off of the interaction and stuff, but actually seeing some of these students and hearing them say, hey, it's doable and we don't feel cheated. And, my advisor's in Canada, and I've only met him once and we had a chat, but I was like, actually, that's kind of cool to get that perspective. So you bridge geography with distance learning, and I think is, I guess, one of the positive parts of it, but definitely an economic, I get all that, what you guys are talking about. So.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thanks, Eric, for the invite. Thank you, students. And Tyler's jumped out. He was answering a few questions in the chat for me and everything. So I found this very informative, and I think it's a great program that you guys partner with the AARP on. And also, this is part of that hybrid experience too. So thank you.
Just so you guys know, Ward is one of my former instructors at University of Oregon. So he's coming from Eugene right now, and we happen to be chatting around this time. And I was like, hey, you might want to be interested in checking this out. So there's a case in point is people from far away can be part of your session. So.
Absolutely. I think the best part of all of this is that you could be in any time zone and you can participate. Years ago that just wouldn't have even been thought of. And now you can have somebody on the other side of the world. If they want to stay up, they could be watching what we are. So thank you. So if you want to, we'll make sure that this recording is available for anyone who would want to watch this at another time. We'll have that. And so, Sheena, are we going to sign off here?
Yes, I think, thanks to everybody, a great class, and I'm really excited about spreading the word on all this technology. It's really kind of fun. Thanks to you students, and we sure appreciate your time. We know you got plenty to do, and thank you, Eric, for doing this for us.
And Eric, you did a great job. So you can do this in the liquor class too if you want.
Okay, thanks you guys. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.